So it's a pleasure to be with you again. My name is Trevor Pfahl. I am an IELTS examiner, and I have been teaching and helping students with their English and with IELTS since 1998. And over the last 10 to 12 years, I have focused exclusively on helping students move further ahead in their TOEFL and their IELTS preparation, whether it's for academic purposes or for immigration purposes. So we've been doing a series, and we've talked about writing and how to form an essay. We've talked about speaking and how we need to be going through and what the examiner is listening for when you're speaking. We have done part one of reading, which you can view on our Facebook and YouTube pages, and you need to watch that first because that will give you some of the strategies and some of the skills that we're going to expand on and give you more details today. So I'll sometimes be glancing off to the side here where I have some of the information, and we will be showing you from the screen also what I'm looking at as we go through. So just a quick review. I want to remind you that when you have a reading exam, even if it's not IELTS, you should always be looking through the information and then looking for the keywords from the questions just to get a general idea. What is that section? What am I looking for? Many times I see students, they start to read through the passage and they want to understand the materials, but during an exam you only have a limited time of 1 hour, so you need to change your strategy to be glancing at it, then to look at the questions, understand keywords from the questions, and start looking for the answers for those questions. I also talked about in our last session of read the questions for keywords and question type, then to look for the easier questions, which are details, numbers, names, information that you can find quickly in a passage. And then we're looking at not spending too much time on one question. So as I'm going through and I see something is difficult, then I leave it, make a little note. I go and look for other questions that are easier, because in your limited 1 hour, you're trying to get the highest mark possible. So do the easier questions first, leave the harder questions. So that was a quick review from our previous session. Now what we're going to look at is we're going to look at a practice IELTS exam. We'll look at part 1, part 2, and part 3 with different question types, and I will review and be explaining to you how I'm looking for the answers in these sections. So I'm just going to bring up on the screen. You're going to see on one side of the screen are the questions, and in the first section there are 9 questions, and on the second side beside it you're going to see the reading passage that we're looking for the answers. So when I'm looking at this information, so I look at the reading passage not to comprehend every sentence or word. I'm just going to scan through with my eyes in that information. And so as I'm looking through this reading passage, I see the title. It says Travel Books on New Zealand. And as I'm looking, I see A, and there's a title and a person's name, Peter Mitchell. Then I see a paragraph, and then I see B. There's Fishing Holidays with another person's name, Tim Jarvis. I glance down at C, New Zealand Travel and Touring, and it says Driving Club of New Zealand, so not an individual's name. D, Gap Year New Zealand with Anna Ma, and then E, Adventure Time New Zealand with Natalie McCullen. So just looking at it, I see, oh, there's different people writing about different information on New Zealand. The same keywords are coming up, New Zealand, New Zealand, New Zealand. And then their paragraphs are divided into topics: hitchhiking, fishing, travel and tour, gap year, adventure time. So the first question that I often have from students is, Mr. Trevor, I don't understand the word hitchhiking in part A, or in letter D, it says gap year New Zealand. I don't understand what that means. You're not going to understand all of the vocabulary words in every passage that you see in IELTS. But what I'll help you with is how do we get some clues from the passage or from sentences around those words, and some words you don't need to know because it might not be related to your questions. So I've glanced through and highlighted or understood parts of the reading passage. Now I look at the questions, and as I skim through them, in this case they're matching. So I have 9 questions and I have 5 paragraphs. So I need to find which paragraph of these 5 matches which of these sentences of the 9 questions. So I glance through the first 2 or 3 questions and identify some of the key words. So I look at question 1, written by an organization, not an individual. Well, I remembered as I read through those titles, some of those were people's names, Peter, Tim, Anna, but there was one that was not a person's name. So maybe that is my answer, but I'm just thinking of this right now. In question 2, advice on cheap places. So when I hear the word cheap, that means a low cost. So I need to be scanning through the paragraphs looking where does it tell me about something that does not cost a lot. So I'm looking for similar words. Number 3, this focuses on holidays that do not damage the environment. So my key words are not damage and environment. So I'm going to look through paragraph A, B, C, D, and E, scanning through those to see where does it talk about the environment, and whether it's the specific word environment or whether there's synonyms, other words that talk about the landscape, the atmosphere, the jungle, or the ocean, or areas that we would use with the word environment. So I don't read all 9 because then my mind is too full. I go back and I say, okay, let's look at number 1 and 2. This is from an organization, not an individual. So I go back to those titles. So in A, it says Peter. That's a person's name. That's not my good choice. B was with Tim. So that's a name, a person's name, not a good choice. C, Driving Club of New Zealand. So when I see this, oh, well, that's not a person, maybe that's a group, especially I see the word club, so that's possible. D, Anna Ma. No, Anna is a name. E, Natalie McLaughlin. Oh, that's also a person's name because I have a first and a last name. So with 1, this one is only one possible choice. Letter C, Driving Club of New Zealand. I might not even know what that is, but I've eliminated the other choices because those are individual names. So I would have 1C. Number 2, cheap places to stay. So last time that we were meeting, when I talked about reading in part 1, I talked about skimming and scanning. And I encouraged you to take a newspaper and just be looking for numbers or names. So this is where I can be using that practice to build up my speed in my eyes, because now with cheap places, I'm going to go through each paragraph. So it will take me some time, but I want to look, does this talk about price? So I'm not trying to identify every single word in every paragraph. I'm just looking through. Does it talk about place to stay? Maybe like words that come to mind is a hotel, a hostel, a travel area, a bed and breakfast, or just where it says this is low cost or budget or discount. So as I'm looking through, I look through the first paragraph. It talks about hitchhiking. Again, maybe I don't know what that means, but a great way to see New Zealand. You have time on your hands. It's a way of traveling that sticks, not a way that's with time travels. Mitchell also points out New Zealand weather might be poor. This book is not strong on major cities. So if you notice, I'm not reading every sentence for in-depth meaning. I'm just trying to glance for words that match from the question that I have. As I'm looking through paragraph 1 in A, I don't see that answer. So then I look at paragraph 2. This is talking about fishing holidays. So paragraph 1, I see the word country to go fishing. In his book, Tim covers many of the famous and not famous places to fish. In the next sentence, fishing. This is talking about fishing, not about cheap places to stay. So many times, again, students may say, well, that's easier for you, but how do I, because I need to understand every word. What is wonderful? What is unspoiled? If you're looking at some types of questions, for example, fill in the blank, yes, you need to understand the section. But with this type of question where I'm matching sentences and paragraphs, I'm just looking to match key words, not the whole sentence. So I've gone through paragraph A, I've gone through paragraph B. If I look at paragraph C, it's talking about New Zealand travel and touring. So travel resource, a detailed map, has distance and time, locations, North Island and South Island. The dimensions are 500 mm by 680 mm. That's the last sentence. My eye was drawn to that because that's a number that's given, and I'm looking for something about cheap. But it doesn't talk about where to stay. It talks about how to travel. So I'm skipping or moving on to the next paragraph. In paragraph D, it's talking about young people visiting, working, studying, or living in New Zealand, how to find a job, how to open a bank account, get social security number. It's not talking about a place to stay or a cheap place to be living. And then I look at paragraph E, adventure time, adventure and eco travel. Activities like boating, caving, background on the area's history, basic travel information. So this is the second last paragraph, such as hotels, restaurants, shopping, makes it easier to have individual places, excursions. So you've just seen me fail, in a sense. I've gone through here and I can't find, going through about cheap places to stay, even though I know now more information of what each paragraph is about, but I can't find the answer yet. So at this stage, students often start to go back and go even slower. I don't think that's a good strategy because remember, you have a time limit. If you do like I do, you look through and you're not finding it, go on to an easier question. Try to get a couple more right from words that you do find. The benefit of what I just did is that now I have an idea of each paragraph. So if I see a question further on, maybe question 4 or question 6 with about fishing or about how to find your way around the New Zealand, I know which paragraph to go to. But I haven't found 2 yet, so I make a question mark next to it. Number 3, this focuses on holidays that do not damage the environment. Well, I remember in the last paragraph it was talking about adventure and eco-travel, and then it said a way of traveling that doesn't hurt, so it's a synonym, doesn't hurt, natural habitat. So maybe you know with habitat that it's a synonym for environment, but if you don't, you can still see natural, natural nature, those words. So even sometimes the adjectives can help us understand. And then boating, caving, rafting, kayaking gives information about the history. So this is talking about activities we would do outdoors or in an area where there's mountains and rivers and oceans. So I would match 3 with E, and then I would move on. There's always a small chance that it's not correct, but as I'm looking at this in just quickly to find some that match easily, this is the faster way to be doing this. Number 4. This will tell readers how to deal with bureaucratic necessities of working in New Zealand. Again, most students stop in that question. They say, I don't know what bureaucratic means. I don't know what necessities means. So I can't answer this question. My advice for you, though, is what are the other key words? Okay, I don't know bureaucratic necessities, but it says working and in New Zealand. Well, I remember as I was reading through one of those, I saw the word working in one paragraph. So I glance back again. A, about going hitchhiking. No, it didn't talk about working. B, about fishing holiday. C, about traveling and touring. D, book is for anyone thinking of visiting, working, studying. There's the key word that I'm looking for, working in New Zealand for 1 or 2 years. So even though I don't know some of the vocabulary in the question, perhaps, I can match D and number 4 together because of the word working. Okay, so in today's session, I'm not going to go through all the questions one by one. I want you to just understand the strategies, and again, you have to watch part 1 in order to be reminded and see the charts and see the advice that I was giving there. We have posted those PDFs that I was using with the question types, how to skim and scan, how to do logical thinking, how to read faster, and how to the 5 steps we have for reading, how to prepare for your exam. So in this section, I'm just showing you with these 3 or 4 examples, how am I going through? So I'm thinking about my time. As you saw with question 2, I didn't find it, I leave it and move on, but I'm also matching the words that I know. Let's move down to a different question type now. So we're going to go down to the next set of questions. This was questions 1 to 9. We're going to look at questions 11 to 14, and it has a different reading passage. So, sorry?
Is it 10 to 14?
10 to, you're correct, because number 9 was on the first part. So just give me a minute while I move down on my questions and on the reading passage so that you can see that. Okay, so again, I have questions 10 to 14, and then I have the passage that's divided into 5 paragraphs, although 1 paragraph is very short. Okay, and I see the questions. These question types are multiple choice. I have A, B, C, or D answers that I can be giving. So my strategy is still very similar. I want to answer the easier questions first. I know or find the easier questions by looking at keywords. So I look through the reading passage just for titles to see what is the general idea. So I see in my reading passage it has swimming that's underlined, then it has junior gym, okay, kids football, children's funky dance, and party. So at least I have those. Again, I don't know what children's funky dance is or party, but I have some categories. And I see at the very top, the title says, Brockdale Sports Center Activities for Children. I don't know where Brockdale is. I don't worry about that. But I know that this is telling me activities for children. So I look at question number 10 on the section. Children taking swimming lessons must, and then I have 4 choices. Have basic swimming skills before starting, be members of the sports center, be watched by their parents, be a minimum of 5 years old. So I'm looking at either an age or their parents, or be members, or have swimming skills. So with those ideas in my mind, I go and look at the paragraph, and I need to find where does it say must or a synonym, have to be, they required, requirement. So I read through the first couple of sentences. We run swimming lessons, children, different ages and swimming ability. Second sentence, children have to be members. Oh, that was one of my answer choices. I go back and see, have basic swimming skills in A, B, be members. Well, here I can match those words up. Be members of the sports center? Yes, they need to be members. So I match 10B as finding it in the passage. I leave it and I go on to question 11. Sometimes students say to me, but I need to read the rest of the passage. I have to understand the rest of the passage. No, this is how you save time during the exam. I'm matching the words that I find with an answer choice, and then I move to another question. If I have time at the end of the exam, I can come back and look and check some of my answers. But if I see the words and they're matching together with one of the choices, choose it and move on. Okay, so number 11, parents putting children onto a swimming class waiting list have to pay a small deposit. B, must do before the end of November, so there's a time signal, November. Are usually unsuccessful giving children lessons, must do so during term time. So A and D are talking about when, and A is talking about money or a deposit, and C is talking about not succeeding, not, in this case they say unsuccessful. So now I go through the rest of the paragraph and I identify, are any of those keywords in the sentences following? So I go through quickly. So we run classes for parents, usually from 3 years of age, lessons for adults. I'm not worried about that. I'm looking at the wait list. Swimming lessons are organized with school term times. Okay, so that talks about the term time, but not about the parents in that sentence. The closing date is the last day of November, so B is mentioned with November, but it doesn't talk about the wait list, which is part of my keywords in the question. So I have some information, but it's not matching 100%. Okay, the closing for the summer is in March, closing in autumn is in July. Swimming lessons are popular and numbers are limited. To secure a place, ensure you apply as early as possible. We do have a waiting list. Okay, there's my keyword from the question. Parents with children on the waiting list, swim class waiting list. We do have a waiting list for swimming classes. This is the last sentence in that paragraph. But people on it are more often than not disappointed. That's a very confusing sentence, but I see they're more often disappointed. So if you're disappointed about something, that means that you failed or you were not successful. My choices in C are usually unsuccessful. That's similar to being more often disappointed. And so for some of you, you may choose B because you saw November, or you saw, oh, here's term time, here's letter D, that's the right choice. That's where the IELTS exam is trying to trick you a little bit. I need to match as many of the keywords as I can. And so in this case, number 11, I would be looking at the last sentence, unsuccessful and more often disappointed. Again, I'm not going to go through 12, 13, 14, but you can see with my strategies and style, this will give you a quick way to answer several of the questions. You can't answer every question like this, but it gives you a quick way to look for some information and then be going through the passage and finding those keywords in some of the sentences. Then I slow down and read more carefully, and I take my time to match up what is the correct answer. So we've looked at matching in questions 1 to 9. We've looked at multiple choice in questions 10 to 14. Let's go down to the next section, which is questions 15 to 21. So I'm just needing to move down so I have the questions in front of me. So here is something in these next group of questions where on the top of the page it says write no more than 3 words, and that's in bold print. So now I know my maximum. I have 3 words, no more than 3 words from the text for each answer. So in this matching, it's a little bit matching, a little bit fill in the blank. What I need to do is look at my questions, so 15, 16, I'll look at those 2 to start. I find those sentences and key words in the passage, and then I find which word is missing to put into the sentence. So with 15, the prices at the staff cafeteria ensure it's a place to meet other staff members. So my focus is on the prices. So I look at the passage now, and it's divided into sections: cafeteria, sport, watching football. Well, in my question 15, it's asking about the cafeteria. So I look at that paragraph very closely. it says the staff cafeteria provides heavily subsidized meals for breakfast or lunch. Cafeteria opens 6:30 a.m., closes at 3 p.m. Reservations are never necessary. Because of the prices, the cafeteria is always a place to go, so that's part of my question. Eat and socialize before work and in the middle of the working day. So I don't have an exact word that fits from that sentence, so I need to go back to the first sentence. The staff cafeteria provides heavily subsidized meals for breakfast and lunch. I don't understand, let's say that I don't understand the vocabulary. I don't know what heavily subsidized means. So now I'm confused. What fits in here? Because it doesn't say low price, high price. It's using vocabulary that you don't understand, possibly. So I need to go to another strategy. I need to use my grammar knowledge. And for some students this is easier, for other students they need practice. But you need to remember, how is my grammar sentence formulated? How do I make a sentence? So I usually have a subject, I have a verb, and I have an object. Okay, so Trevor is a teacher. And then I can add adjectives to the teacher or to my name. So my friend Trevor, who is a teacher, is teaching or has taught many years, or I can always add more details. When I'm looking at question 15, it says the blank prices. And when I'm looking at the first sentence, the staff cafeteria provides heavily subsidized meals. Those, the blank I'm looking for is an adjective. I need to describe the prices. When I'm looking at this sentence, heavily subsidized, those are adjectives describing the meal. And further down it says because of the price. So as I look through the passage, I don't see other adjectives. The next sentence is about the hours. It says reservations are never necessary. Well, that's an adjective, never, but it doesn't tell me about price. So I'm making a guess, heavily subsidized. Even if I don't understand it, I need to put in to prices. If some of you are confused right now, that's okay. This is maybe the first time you've seen this explained in this way. This is actually an advanced technique. This is something that I would be explaining and practicing with students going for their academic 6, 5, 7, or 8. So that's where I go back to my set of rules. Choose the easy questions. If you don't spend too much time on one question, if you're confused or not having enough time, go to another question. So for me, with an advanced student, I would describe and explain how to do it. If you're confused and you're not understanding 15, just move on to 16. See if you can answer 3 or 4 other questions more quickly or easier than 15. So number 16, the blank is the place to find the company gym. Okay, well now I need to find out about the company gym. Where does it talk about that? So paragraph 2, sport. We have our own gym in the, oh, okay, so we usually with a place, we talk about going to a place, or we talk about a place and you say this is in the, or inside the. So it says we have our gym in the annex next to our main building. So I have 2 places, annex and that main building. Sometimes students say, oh, it's main building. No, it's beside it or next to main building, but in. So where is the place? The annex. Again, some students say, well, I don't understand the word. That's where I'm using my grammar knowledge of prepositions, in, to, at. Here, in the means that that's where something is located. So that's where I would put the annex is the place to find the company gym. So you see, with these style of questions, I want to be working on some grammar strategies and grammar skills and practicing. If some of this becomes confusing, I go to an easier level. I find websites, or in my case, I give students easier practice till they learn the skill and become comfortable. then I bring them to this exam, whereas sometimes there's sections that are a bit harder. Okay, we'll do one more, and then I'll leave the rest. Although employees can use the facilities, they have no blank at the golf club. So I need to find, where does it talk about golf club? Probably it's still under sports. So I scan through those sentences looking for golf club. So in first sentence, we have our own gym. Second sentence, using the gym. The third sentence, every other Monday. Fitness instructor, about the gym. So all of that's still about the gym. Fourth sentence, please do not use the gym without the induction. We also have company membership at the town golf club. Oh, here it's talking about the golf club. Our staff have playing and social membership access to the club, but they do not have, and my question, it says they have no blank at the golf club. So in my last part of that sentence, but they do not have any voting rights for the club, or in terms of how the club is run. So they have playing and social membership. They do not have voting rights. So I'm basically looking at the sentences and the building blocks of a sentence. I find that in the passage where I have the same keywords, and then I pick out what's missing. They don't have, they have no voting rights. That's what I match up. If you're finding this difficult, that's okay, because as we go through, this is where I and other teachers should be helping you to see where are you strong and weak. For some of you, the matching was quite easy and quick, and then for some of you, you found multiple choice, that was easy. Maybe you come to this, you find it's more difficult. That's okay. That's why you're learning and you're studying for the IELTS. So then you know, oh, if this is more difficult, I need to spend more time studying grammar. I need to practice more questions like this. Okay, we're going to look at one set of questions that many students, in fact, I would say almost all of them say, this is their least favorite. This is what they do not enjoy when they're answering the questions, which are, let me just go down, the true, false, not given questions. Okay, so the reason they're not very popular, the true questions are quite easy. It's the false and not given, as I explained in part 1 in our last session together. That's where students get a bit confused, or they're not sure what they're looking at. So I want to be looking at questions 22 to 27, and then I want to be looking at the reading passage. You can see this is a little bit different format. It's not organized in nice, neat paragraphs. Instead, it has some information, then it has bullet points, meaning short sentences with a dot at the front. Then there's more paragraphs halfway down, and then there's more points towards the bottom. So let's read through question 22 and 23. Working part-time is a form of flexible working. And number 23, recent government legislation made it compulsory for companies to consider flexible working, employees flexible working. So both are talking about flexible working, part-time, and about government law or government legislation. So now I look at the passage and I want to look at the first few sentences. Can I find information about what is part-time work and about government law? So I read, here I'm going to be reading a little bit more slowly, but I read through the sentences. So there are many forms of flexible work. It can describe a place of work, for example, home working, or a type of contract, such as a temporary contract. Other common variations include part-time working. Oh, I remember those words. Those are some of the key words I'm looking for. Flexi-time, job sharing, and shift work. So I go back to question 22. Working part-time is a form of flexible working. In this sentence, there are many forms of flexible working, so I have those keywords. Place of work, type of contract, part-time working, flex-time, job sharing. Yes, this is in that list. So with 22, I write T, I write true. And so I match it. I don't keep looking or thinking, oh, maybe it's in the next paragraph. No, I've matched my keywords. I've identified this as true. I move on to question 23. So now I'm looking at government legislation or government laws. So as we look through the next section, I'll scan through it again. Employees with fewer than 26 weeks service do not have a statutory right to request flexible working. We allow all staff to make a request. To make a request for flexible working, employees must. Okay, so again, this is where vocabulary comes in. There might be some words that are difficult for you or that you're not comfortable or you haven't heard before. If you're looking through and you don't see where it talks about government laws, and you go through that section, you go through the next section, it still doesn't talk about government laws, I would leave this question and move on, because you're maybe missing some of the vocabulary needed to answer this question correct. And if you scan right to the very bottom looking for government law, you're wasting time, because your questions will usually be one after the other. So government law has made it compulsory for companies to consider employee flexible working. Well, it says here, with fewer than 26 week service, do not have a right to request flexible working. But it's not talking about the company, or it's not saying that they must or that it's compulsory. So I'm not seeing that it's true. I don't see anything about government laws. I'm not seeing that it's false. I'm not seeing some of those key words. So right now, I would put in not given with a question mark, and I would leave it and move on, because I want to spend more time with easier questions, and if I have time, I will come back to this. So I'm guessing not given, question mark, just because I don't see it talking about government law or about companies, and I'll come back. 24. If employees have previously had a flexible working request turned down, they are not permitted to make another request. So it's basically saying, if you have asked for a request and you haven't got it, you can't make a second request, another request. Well, let's look at the next points to see. So it says in the bullet points, in the short sentences, make their request in writing. Okay, so that's how to do it. State whether they had a previous application for flexible work. So it does talk about previous, so I'm matching that keyword, and the date of that application. This, and this is in brackets now, this will not affect the new application. So I go back to my question because I want to make sure my words are matching. If employees had a flexible work request turned down, they are not permitted to make another request. So we would answer false, because it's saying it does not affect the new application. You can apply again based on this sentence. So if it did affect the application, they would have said, no, you cannot apply a second time. So question 22, I've said true. Question 23, I've guessed not given with a question mark. Question 24, I would say is false. You can make another application. Again, there's more questions here, but that just gives you an understanding of how I would be matching some of these. You see the basic foundation for all of my answers and looking for information is I'm skimming and scanning to find keywords from the question in the passage. Then when I find them, I slow down, and then I start matching pieces of information. Multiple choice, fill in the blank, true, false, not given. I'm using the same style with all of those types of questions. So I'm going to just look very quickly at the very last group of questions. And so to do this, we need to look down to the page 11 in the PDF. And so the next section is a bit more confusing, because this is your last passage. There's actually 2 pages of reading to go through, and then the questions are at the end of it. So it's much longer than what we've been looking at so far. I just want to look at the questions for this. So questions 28 to 35, I'm glancing through this part, and I want to read through and see what is it asking me to do. So with these questions, it says the text on the previous pages has 8 paragraphs, A through H. Choose the correct heading for each section from the list of headings below. Write the correct number 1 up to 9. So it has 11. It has an X with a 1, which is an 11, in boxes 28 to 35. Okay, so a couple of things to give you advice in this area. First of all, you need to know Roman numerals, meaning the little I with a dot is number 1, 2 little i's together is number 2, 3 little i's together is number 3, and then a little I with a V means 4. It means 5 minus 1. So you need to know these numbers probably from 1 to 10, or in this case even up to 11. You should also know the symbol for 50, 50, and for 100. So the symbol for 50 and then 100, those may appear on the test. They may not, but in this case that would be helpful. Secondly, when I'm looking through those words, so 1, 2, 3, it says international collaboration, infertility problems, breeding, significant threats to polar bears, tracking bears. I'm looking and trying to see which words do I understand and which don't I understand. So international collaboration, I know international, maybe I'm not sure about collaboration. Infertility problems, so difficulties or problems. Breeding, threats to polar bears, okay, so it's talking about bears and polar bears. Tracking bears, preserving habitat, diet, reduced genetic pool. I'm seeing some words that may be very difficult for some people. Most people at this stage, their mind turns off, and so they just say, I don't understand these 3 or 4 words, I can't do this. I'm just going to guess. That's where I think you're making a little bit of a mistake. What you want to do is look for what are the easier words that I do understand. So polar bears, tracking bears, diet, greater funding, so talking about money, international, talking about different countries or people in different countries, and then the last one, conflict with people. There's 4 or 5 that I know those words for, so let's look at answering those questions first. I've already done some examples with matching, so I'm not going to go through these, but I would look at each paragraph and I would look at those words and I would see which of these can I match quickly. If it's talking about food, I would match it with number 7 with the diet, the V with the 2 I's. If it's talking about people and problems with people, I would choose 11, the X with the I. If it's talking about different countries or people from different countries, I would match it with number 1, international collaboration. So even with words I don't know, really focus to not turn off your mind, but look for the words you do know and try to at least answer 3 or 4 correct, even if you're not going to get all of them correct. The last couple of questions in this section, which is on the next page, the last page of this part, questions 36 to 39 are true, false, not given. I'm not going to review that because we've talked about that already. You're looking for, does it have the same information in the question in the sentence? Does it have the wrong or the opposite information in the question in the sentence? Then I choose false. Or does it not talk about those keywords and that information? And in that case, I choose not given. And then the very last question here is asking about a title, and I have A, B, C, or D. So again, it's going back to the multiple choice questions. So I've been talking a lot about questions. So I would encourage you, some parts you may say, well, that's already too confusing for me. That's okay. That's where I usually see if students are applying for general exams. I have other practices that I use first to get them more familiar, build up their vocabulary, build up their grammar, help them start making some logical connections and practicing these skills before I start in the IELTS. If you're looking at the academic exam, even there with that last passage, there's probably going to be some terms or vocabulary you're not familiar with. Well, you've seen me explain several strategies to, if I don't know the word, I still can be eliminating some wrong answers, I can be looking at the grammar, and I can be making some logical guesses to at least narrow down my choices or make it more likely to be successful. I'm going to leave you with one final thought. When you're in elementary school, junior high school, university, or college, your professor always wants you to get 100%. You've been trained your whole life, I need to get 100% in my reading and in my exams. On an English exam, whether it's academic or general focus, you're not aiming for 100%, because that's the point of the exam. You're aiming for a 5 or a 5.5 for your general exam. You're aiming for a 6.5, a 7. For some of you, you need a 7.5 for the academic. The range or scale is out of 9. So this is not exact, but it means that you have to get about 60% of questions, 50 to 60% for the general exam. So that means getting 6 out of every 10. For the academic exam, you need to be getting about 7, maybe 8 out of every 10. So when I'm coming to questions where I'm not finding the answer quickly or I'm confused with the vocabulary, this is where you can have a little bit of peace of mind, relax a little bit, go on and find other questions that you can find more easily or more quickly, because you're trying to get the most right in that 1 hour of time. Many students come and talk to me and say, Mr. Trevor, I understand vocabulary, I know grammar, I understand the passages, but I run out of time. I'm on question 33 or question 35 out of 40, and the teacher says, you have 2 minutes left, oh, your time is up, I have to hand it in. So I just guess those last couple. Their focus is not their English, their focus is the test strategies. And so I've been giving you some advice in the first session we did and now in the second session. How do I manage my time? How do I go more quickly by building up my skills of reading faster, skimming and scanning, logical thinking? And how do I understand the question types before I take the exam? And for many students, this combination should take you 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. This is not something where next Saturday, oh yeah, I watched these 2 videos. Next Saturday, I'm going to go take IELTS. You need several months, weeks, but usually months of practicing this so that your mind starts to be thinking in this way, and then you will be more successful on your next IELTS exam. I'm happy that we had this chance to go through some of this. I know that there's going to be questions coming in from this section, so I ask that you be responding, making comments, posting below, and we will respond to your questions as quickly as we can.
We have one question here from Mr. Mahmoud Mahdi.
Okay.
He says, could you support about practice for matching headings?
Okay. Okay, so we have a question then from Mr. Mohammed asking about, from Mr. Mahmoud asking about matching the headings. So I'll review what I've talked about, and then I encourage you to go back to the first part of this this recording to see and review that section with that. So the steps that I'm taking for this is I glance through the passage I need to read. I'm not looking for understanding the whole passage. What I'm looking for is what are the topics, what are the main ideas in this? Is it talking about animals? Is it talking about the environment? Is it talking about a country? Then I look at the questions, and I'm looking at the key words in the question. What questions does it talk about where, or a time, or a place? Then I look through the first, the first 1 or 2 questions. I look through the first paragraph or 2. Which of those key words can I match? And then put those 2 together. I need to match the keywords 80–90%. So if I see one keyword, let's say work, but then I see work appears 10 different times, that's too general. I need to look for several other keywords. So flexible, working, part-time, those are 3 keywords from my question. Now I look at my passage. Where do I see flexible, work, and part-time all in the same sentence or in sentences that are close to each other? So that's where I'm matching those areas. And as you'll see as I went through, sometimes I'm skimming down, looking quickly. I don't find some information. So for me, instead of going back and looking a second time or for another 2 or 3 minutes, I move to an easier question. I save a bit of time at the end of the exam. I go back to that question. So I trust that that's going to answer your question, but it's a step-by-step process. We are going to be posting my strategies and recommendations for the how do you answer the 5 steps in reading, and then the individual question types. Go through those steps, because many times people look at the information, they don't understand a word or vocabulary, and they jump to the last section and just guess and move on. I want you to be practicing the middle steps of eliminating some wrong answers, using your grammar knowledge, using your logical thinking knowledge to try to find that answer. Good.
We're done with questions.
Okay, so there may be more questions that will be coming in. We will add them, but we will end this recording at this time and we'll respond in the comments to your questions. Well, I thank you so much for watching as we've gone through this time. This is not always the easiest to be listening and watching. You need to have the demonstration in front of you, but more than that, you need to be practicing. And so look for some similar types of questions. We'll post some examples online. Look for other websites as well. Or in the near future, inshallah, we will have a class that will be online that you can be also participating in. Thank you for your time.